Hello and welcome back to an episode of Generation Ochi. My name is American Ben. I'm no expert on manga, but I get a sense that it's often a medium that isn't given the respect it deserves relative to other forms of literary expression, especially relative to novels and screenplays. And I say this because some more traditionalist-minded people may try to convince you that while a show like Alice in Borderland is in good fun, it doesn't quite have the artistic significance of shows derived from the more traditional mediums of literature I just mentioned. But in my view, Alice in Borderland is just good, period. And that's why I've been so inspired to make videos on it in which I take painstaking effort to interpret its themes and break down its characters. Thematically speaking, the show strikes a nerve, and its diverse cast of characters imbues Borderland's world with color, though oft that color is the red of bloodshed. On one hand, there are deep characters, people who have complicated philosophies and ambiguous moral underpinnings. And on the other, there are the fun characters, the characters we just like to watch be themselves. And the last boss is really the perfect mix of both of these characters. And while I love some of the other characters, Kuina especially, if I'm being honest, for me, the last boss is truly the character that puts Alice in Borderland a notch above most other series. He's just so perfectly weird, unpredictable, and according to some of you, cute even. And hey, I suppose the way he wields that katana like a psychotic bipedal cricket is kinda hot. I can see it. But I digress. I'm such a digressor. Despite this channel still being brand new, it feels like this video has been a long time coming. And so without further ado, let's break down this creepy, crawly, enigmatic character. We first ran into the last boss amid a death game montage. Everything was totally normal as far as death games go until, well, Alice in Borderland, you have my attention. Who is this goddamn beautiful maniac? Well, the answer is that he was part of the Militant's crew at the beach. From the moment we met him, two things were clear. One, he had a penchant for violence, and two, he had an aversion to sitting down. Seriously, he never sat down. Sitting down is what people do in the original world, I guess. But oh, I suppose I've gotten a bit too ahead of myself here. This is ultimately why I personally could never be the last boss. I'm all about sitting down. Like, I'll be on the subway and there'll be an old lady just so tired looking, just needs to sit down, and I'll just be like, no, step off. This is my goddamn seat, and life is rough. But I digress. I always digress. What quickly became evident about the last boss was that he was subservient. He and Naragi are easy characters to compare as they both exhibited psychopathic tendencies. However, the difference is that the last boss wasn't looking to rise. He wasn't ambitious. He existed but to kill, and there's nothing he enjoyed doing more. Yeah, he killed whenever he got the chance. That poor woman didn't really commit any sort of egregious transgression. I mean, okay, she was a little bit melodramatic, but a little bit of hysteria doesn't justify impaling her with a sword, right? So anyway, being a subservient member of the Militants of the Beach was kind of a good deal for the last boss and for his superiors. The latter got a good soldier who would kill anything or anyone, and the last boss got to kill anything or anyone. Let's take a closer look at the contrast between him and Naragi. As I said, the last boss wasn't looking to ascend to number one at the beach. Naragi was. As we discussed before, the last boss's lunge here might have been a bit unsettling for Naragi. Naragi was insecure. He killed to prove his worth and power to others. He tried to put up a maniacal front and make affectations as to his toughness, but he knew that the last boss was the real deal, a legitimate psycho. I think Naragi had insecurities related to both Chishiya and the last boss. With Chishiya, he felt insecure because Chishiya wasn't scared of him and was smarter than him. But when it came to the last boss, Naragi felt insecure because the last boss was actually the brooding psycho that Naragi wanted people to see him as. The last boss wasn't looking to prove anything to anyone. He just wanted to enjoy himself among the lawless revelry of Borderland. The last boss's interactions with people like Kuina were most interesting because she's the type of character who doesn't really belong in this parallel reality, and she definitely doesn't want to be there. She has empathy and isn't a cold-blooded killer. So how can she survive in a world that's more suited to a depraved murderer like the last boss? Well, she has to feign bravery. Kuina was scared here. A lot of people at the beach probably feigned calm around the last boss while wondering what his true intentions were. Though, as I've said before in other videos, Kuina probably wasn't as scared as I thought she was, given that she, is a fire-hearted goddess of war. Sorry, I know I'm always liable to go off on a tangent about Kuina, but she is quite relevant here as a foil for the last boss. Now, if you've seen our video on Kuina, you know her reasons for having to take out the last boss. She's everything that he wasn't. She has been thrown to this heathenous world by a society arbitrated over by people who valued her as they would a psychopathic criminal just for being transgender. Well, the last boss belongs in this world, and so you may ask, then what was the reason for him tracking down and taking on Kuina? And well, I could dig deep and say something about how from his point of view he had to rid Borderland of those who wanted to destroy it, who wanted to escape it, who wanted to bring empathy to it, who wanted to remember their pasts and improve. Honestly, I think that'd be quite a reach. I think he fought Kuina because he ran into her. That's it. He was looking to kill anyone. He didn't fight her to challenge himself either. After all, he had a sword. She didn't. He just wanted to slice and dice her. He didn't care about fighting fair, he just truly enjoyed bloodshed and causing pain. However, I do think that when he realized that she could fight, that there was a certain violent rage to her, that she was able to valiantly risk death, he gained a bit of a respect for her. It was here that he began to sense their connection as outcasts, each of whom for very different reasons were willing to engage in a battle to the death. However, where Kuina's flashbacks demonstrated pain and suffering, that which engendered her supreme resolve and resiliency, the last boss's flashbacks revealed a man looking to escape.
しかし俺には彼らが死ぬことを含む生きる自由を叫んでいるように見えた。今の俺はどうだ?
In real Tokyo, the last boss wasted away his days in a dark, messy room. He was a recluse, antisocial, chaotic, and given the writings that littered his walls, probably had obsessive thoughts that wouldn't leave him alone. His mind was overrun by madness, a deep, philosophical madness. In other words, he was a typical writer.
自ら死に向かって突き進む彼らを常人は理解できないだろう。
He seemed rather infatuated with people who exposed themselves to a high risk of mortality. In particular, an explorer named Robert Peary, who endured great hardship to become the first Westerner to reach the North Pole. The last boss was consumed with thoughts that focused on human denial of death. After all, death is something coming for us all, and yet we don't actively recognize that, especially when we're young. Though perhaps some of you, given your watching habits, might be a little bit more attuned to death than others. But still, almost all of you still don't completely come to terms with it as you go about your day-to-day lives. After all, it's a defense mechanism or a survival mechanism to ignore the loom of death. However, to the last boss, such denial was a weakness. To him, death was a tool that could be used to make life more exciting. It adds risk, kind of like the way gambling makes sports more exciting for some people.
生レバーさえも自らの責任と選択で食うことを許されない国に生まれ、死を意識させない環境に育ち、どうやって本来の生を感じろと。
The raw liver comment here may seem like the random ramblings of a psychopath, but to him, food taboos are an example of how society shields people from the more brutal side of nature. I mean, there's a bit of a disconnect between cooked meat and the live animal it comes from. It's much harder to disconnect raw meat from its source. To eat it is to recognize that a death was caused in order to produce this food. To the last boss, to eat cooked meat is to deny death. Of course, there are other reasons related to health that we don't eat raw meat. But the last boss wanted to take this risk because to him, to mitigate risk is also a way to deny death. There was no middle ground for him, it seems. Either you deny death or you embrace it.
このカリスマ胃から出してくれ。俺は本当の世界に行きたい。
Simply said, he saw society as a simulation. The social contract to him restrained human nature, which is selfish and violent. Chishiya would agree with him here, the difference being that Chishiya appreciates the restraints that social contracts provide. Whereas the last boss wanted to escape such protections, or as he might have said, limitations. So now you know why he ended up in Borderland. He wished to be there, and thus I'm sure the game master saw him as an excellent person to bring in for the havoc and chaos he would cause for other denizens of Borderland.
これは決意表明だ。俺はこの地に永住する。
Again, he didn't want to leave. He fit into that group of beach members who liked being in Borderland, who are better served there, who don't see themselves as trapped, but blessed. When the last boss cleared his first game in Borderland, he seemed exhilarated.
生まれて初めて味わった生きる自由。
He wasn't scared or traumatized here. That's not why he appeared frenzied. No, he was in a state of euphoria. It's as if he had just had sex. Shortly after this, he began to delete his identity. He wanted to completely escape and delete his past because Borderland, for those who like being there, is often about forming a new identity, an ideal identity that could not be attained in the real world. There's a lot of people in the real world who feel despair about being trapped in society, about having to follow society's rules, and not just the basic rules like don't murder, but societal expectations as well, like go to school, get a job, work all day and night, etc. People who aren't wired to function according to these expectations often search for escapes in order to cope with their lives. The Last Boss escaped using the internet and through his writing, but Borderland is the ultimate escape. It's a whole new world where the fantastical person he wanted to be could come to life and no one would know anything of the computer-addicted recluse that he used to be back in reality.
全身に思いっきりいいのを頼む。元の世界で生活できないくらいの。
Thus, by the time he met Kuina, his past had largely ceased to exist.
俺に過去などない。
The Last Boss wanted to make Borderland the real world, and his Borderland self his real self. For him, Borderland was about indulgence. Indulgence in one's most unabashed natural passions, whether they jibe with real-world morality or not. It's the erasure of his past that leads Kuina to say this to him.
うちらは互いに過去を嫌っとる。あんたは過去に背を向け続ければいい。でもうちは生きるためにもう一回過去と向き合う。
Thus, she herself recognizes what made them different. She does not want to let go of her past. She wants to keep her history so that it can continue to fuel her. Both the good things and the bad make her stronger and drive her forward. At some point soon after, the Last Boss began to throw glass bottles at Kuina, which shattered all around her. He then said to her,
やはり俺とお前とでは生きる覚悟が違う。
I discussed this back and forth in the Kuina video as well. This was a fatal miscalculation by the Last Boss. When he deleted his past, he actually ceded all reasons he might have had to survive aside from pleasure. How much pain would one bear for the sake of elation? Kuina still has people she loves, her mother specifically, back in the real world. This gives her far greater will to survive than the Last Boss could have ever hoped to have. He might have been crazier, but Kuina could take more pain. She's the transgender woman who's been callously thrown out of her world by her family and community. She already knows how to overcome pain. The Last Boss, on the other hand, threw himself out of his world. I'm not even sure he could feel pain. And without pain, you can't build strength. You can't build willpower.
力尽きればただ土に変えるだけ。ここに感謝する。俺は今この上なく自由だ。
The Last Boss had a quaint final foray into the philosophical here, but what's noteworthy to me is that he wasn't too bummed out about dying. Again, what had he to live for at this point? He wanted to taste death, and he got to. He shed a lot of blood, he killed, but he had no past, no meaning, nothing. Thus, it was always going to be hard for someone like him to survive for very long in Borderland. But that's okay because there wasn't anything that complex about him. He was never shooting for anything higher. And in that way, he couldn't really be beaten, because to be beaten means to not accomplish one's goals. But it seems he did, and his very lack of ambition outside of causing mayhem and bloodshed made him rather powerful in this way. Not wanting anything and not loving anyone or having a past, while a weakness, is also a strength, in that the Last Boss couldn't really lose. He didn't mind facing down his own death all that much. Anyways, that's my summation of The Last Boss. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm really excited to see your comments. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. For now, my name is American Ben. I'll catch you next time. Generation Ochi, peace.